Glacier Ridge is a metropark within the Columbus Metropark system and owned by the City of Dublin. The park, which lies on 1,000 acres of land, opened to the public in 2002. The restored wetland area and wetland education center, partially funded by Honda of America, is located on the southern end of the park, which opened in 2004. Before settlement, the region that houses Glacier Ridge was part of the Darby Plains, which has loamy, lime-rich soil left behind by glaciers retreating rapidly 17,000 years ago. The 1981 Ohio Biological Survey includes an in-depth history of the Darby Plains, written by Charles C. King of Ohio State University. He uses reference information such as pollen analysis, records from a land surveying company, and descriptions from early settlers to the area to track the changes to the environment. One report claims that prairie grasses in the Darby Plains could grow over 6 feet tall. Other reports state that these prairies had incredibly frequent fires, at least annually, which early settlers began to suppress. According to King, the luxurious growths of grass accumulated and became a wet, thick mass of decay, bringing malaria and white snakeroot. Drainage of the wet prairies prevented these outbreaks and revealed highly productive land for agriculture, which only led to more draining.
Soon, the Darby Plains was transformed, with most of the original ecosystems being replaced with agricultural lands. Common crops were beans, corn, and wheat, which grow well in the loamy soils left from the glaciers. The land plots that would become Glacier Ridge Metro Park were owned in 1877 by farmers. Drawings from the 1877 Union County Almanac show homesteads in Union County's Jerome Township, where Glacier Ridge is now located. There is also contemporary reference information available. Although over 90% of Ohio's pre-settlement wetlands have been destroyed, some preserved sites still remain within the Toledo Metro Park system. The Battelle-Darby Creek Metro Park is one of the few spots where the pre-settlement ecosystem of the Darby Plains is mostly intact. Acquiring land for the park began in the early 2000s when Metro Parks found soil types ideal for wetland restoration. The USDA Web Soil Survey shows that these are the Crosby and Brookstone series, and the soils in this area are high in organic matter and have poor drainage. Jerry Straw-Snyder, a staff member at Glacier Ridge, tells us that one challenge faced when restoration began was finding and closing off the old farm field drain tiles. Tile drainage is a drainage system that is often used for agricultural sites that removes excess surface water from the subsurface and was used to drain the Darby Plains. Removing the water provided lower soil loss and higher soil air capacity, allowing for better crop growth. After these drainage tiles were broken, however, water returned to the site and made dormant native wetland seeds begin to germinate. In some places, soil had to be removed from the wetlands to create topography that would be effective in this ecosystem.
Public perception was another variable identified by Jerry Straw-Snyder that posed a challenge in creation of the wetlands. Initially, the area needed to be cleared, which could be a jarring sight for park visitors to see. If the public was not properly informed on the long-term goals of the project, it could be perceived as a counterintuitive step on improving the park. Today, Glacier Ridge is home to many different species of birds, reptiles, amphibians, and vegetation. Threatened bird species like the least bitterns have been spotted and produce young in the park. These species rely on healthy wetlands for nesting and a source of food. Bird houses are found around the park, encouraging birds to gather around the wetlands. Glacier Ridge is also home to 3 200-year-old white swamp oaks, which predate settlement in Ohio, and cattails are the dominant vegetation near the wetland. However, the restoration is not without problems. As recently as this past summer, invasive purple loosestrife has been a problem, one of the many plants that invade wetlands and make them unfavorable for migratory birds. Battelle-Darby Creek is an ecosystem similar to Glacier Ridge. It suffers from autumn olive, honeysuckle, and Callery pear. All of these invasive plants outcompete native flora, creating unfavorable habitats for native fauna. Overpopulation of deer is a problem throughout Dublin, and Glacier Ridge is no exception. One study conducted by students at Ohio State defined a healthy deer population as 20 to 25 deer per square mile. In the approximately 1.5 square miles of Glacier Ridge, the deer population was 81 in February of 2023 after a 3-year culling program. The study also found that deer in Dublin usually leave invasive species alone while grazing, creating selective pressure against native species. The combined effect of invasive species and deer overpopulation could pose a problem for the future of the wetlands.
The frequency of fire in prairie ecosystems of the Darby Plains is also something that has not been restored in Glacier Ridge, although prescribed burning has taken place in other metro parks. Social problems within the park also persist. In 2000, visitors to the park once it opened was projected to be between 500,000 and 1 million people per year. It has been 20 years since then, and Dublin's population has grown by almost 20,000, but visitation to the park is still under 500,000. Additionally, many visitors to the park complain about ticks, which may further deter the public from visiting this area. The south end of the park, which houses the wetlands, has very few community engagement measures. The Honda Wetland Education Center has very little information for visitors about the wetlands, and the observation deck's binoculars are broken.
In creating a plan for continued restoration, increasing stakeholder engagement is a priority. Getting community members involved would provide necessary labor for restoration and stimulate visitation to Glacier Ridge. 2 schools lie across from the wetlands, so involving students in these projects would be a good first step. Additionally, joint efforts between different community actors could be facilitated. Divisions from the ODNR, the Nature Conservancy, and other grassroots could be recruited to work on some restoration projects. If enough attention is drawn to the restoration, the City of Dublin may be encouraged to allocate more funding towards these projects, making goals easier to reach. In restoration, it's important to set SMART goals. One specific long-term goal is reducing invasive species abundance and decreasing deer populations by about 50%. This goal could be measured through annual counts of invasive species and deer populations conducted by park staff and community volunteer efforts. On the path to achieving this goal, some medium-term goals would be seeing an annual reduction of invasive species and continuing the deer calling program started a few years ago. As a short-term goal, we would like a minimum of 100 hours of volunteer work for removing invasives and planting natives. Another short-term goal would be creating a plan for a continued deer calling program. Although killing or sterilizing deer to achieve this goal would be needed to be done by staff, community opinions and needs can be involved in this project by working with the Dublin City Council and using data from community surveys. To put a time constraint on these goals, we would like to see at least a 25% decrease in invasives, ideally accompanied by an increase in native abundance within 5 years. Projects have been ongoing for 20 years, so 5 years is an adequate time to see significant progress. Another SMART goal we have is increasing visitation to get closer to projections from 2000, as well as increasing community engagement. This can be measured with the tools that currently track visitation to the metro parks. However, this goal is still far from being met. So for a medium-term goal, we would like to see an increase of 100 visitors a month on average by the end of 2025. Volunteer efforts associated with our other restoration goals will ideally increase community engagement and thus visitation. Managing tick populations is another measure we could take to increase visitation. A report by the Huron River Watershed Council explains that introducing wildlife that eats ticks and decreasing mouse populations are a good way to attain these goals. In the short term, the staff should create more park activities for families to participate in and create educational programs. The Honda Wetland Education Center also should be revamped to increase its educational resource. Environmental science classes and clubs at the nearby high school could even work with Metro Park staff to create signs and flyers for the center, increasing community involvement and education value. Staff may also find engaging with the public via social media as a helpful tool to bring people into the park.
Since these are some huge proposed changes, restoration should use adaptive management strategies to reach goals. Reference information included in the Ohio Biological Survey dating back to the 19th century explains what vegetation native to the Darby Plains could be introduced. Before beginning our restoration initiatives park-wide, we hope to test them on smaller plots to make sure they achieve the desired effects. Decreasing deer and mouse populations and introducing vegetation and wildlife could all be tried on small plots to see if they increase biodiversity and wetland health, and scaled up if they are effective. After beginning restoration initiatives on a wider scale, Metro Park staff will need to monitor sites weekly to ensure they are continuing to meet our goals. If any of these measurements are not what we expect, we may need to alter our plan and strategies. Over time, these restoration goals work to restore native biodiversity, increase ecosystem services, and foster a community who appreciates the natural value of the park.